Today I'm talking with Sam Glines, who's CEO of Norse. Welcome, Sam.
Good to be here, Richard. Thank you.
Sam, give us the short history of Norse, because you're a fairly new company, right?
We are. So Norse was founded in mid-April of 2010, but we really didn't get moving into the fraud and security space until 2011. And our roots are really in e-commerce fraud prevention, which we did purposefully because we knew that if our dark intelligence and threat data was powerful and had high fidelity, what better place to test that than when real money was on the line? Mm-hmm. So through multiple proof of concepts, we validated that, and then about 12 to 16 months ago, we started to aggressively pivot and reorient for the enterprise security market.
So now you've got a live threat intelligence solution. What's that made out of?
So live threat intelligence, and we at Norse, we like to talk about dark intelligence. What that means and what that is we maintain a global infrastructure in over 40 countries and over 50 data centers where we are determined to gather, analyze, and collect very early stage malware, early stage malicious URLs, and early IP addresses that are malicious, and acquire that intel and have it available for customers within seconds. The nature of the adversary is one to use techniques that require speed so that they can go undetected, and we call it live because when in the past we've heard the word real time. Real time can mean many different things to many people. So live for us is the continuum we live on, and it's not just live, it's early, it's the new early, if I may, in terms of understanding those threats that are going to cause you a problem when they reach your front door.
So in the past, people would identify with a threat reputation database an IP address that was spewing spam, or somehow they discover that it had malware. But now you're talking about as soon as somebody spins up a malicious site, you see it within seconds.
That's correct. So we use multiple techniques to determine those IPs and URLs that are malicious. We control over 10 million IP addresses, and we use a large number of those to spin up next generation passive agents and sensors that emulate over 600 different applications, both industrial control systems, banking systems, software, hardware, to draw in attackers early. And that allows us to gain, to effectively take the zero-day hit ourselves, if you will, so that we can present that data and have that data available for when those adversaries eventually make their way onto an enterprise or mid-market company. It's one facet of what we do that's very important is it's just as important to identify a malicious URL and IP that is behaving badly as it is to identify when one is no longer behaving badly. And that's something that we have spent an inordinate amount of time engineering algorithms and aging algorithms to ensure that what we present has the highest amount of fidelity in terms of what is risk right now and not dated information.
As anybody who's ever been blacklisted by Spamhaus or something knows, that's just could be devastating to your business if that were the case.
Exactly, and false positives are a problem for reputation companies. As when we saw IP reputation start to take hold many years ago, that was the problem, is the high number of false positives. And so it is a very effective technique, but you have to be very good at it. You have to understand network telemetry and the way that IP addresses work, and that's something that we are very good at. And it allows us to take very aggressive and confident actions with respect to what we recommend an action, what we call actionable intelligence. For us, this is 99% probability of risk, and our recommendation is to, if not block, do something very close to it. So that's what we focus on.
So you built this tremendous architecture and infrastructure in a very short time frame. What's to prevent a competitor jumping in the market as well?
Well, it wasn't a build. So good question. So the company was founded in 2010, but the infrastructure and the architecture goes back long before that. So Tommy Stiennon, my co-founder, actually contributed this as IP to the company. So there, much of this was in place some time back, and so what was to limit the ability for others to duplicate this is the very large sample rate and floor space of the internet we see. Every /8 is covered by Norse. In addition, we have a purpose-built proprietary operating system that allows us to do this at speed using hardware that is much less expensive than what others would need to do if they're running on Linux. So we run on a FreeBSD proprietary operating system that allows us to remain very lightweight and agile from a hardware perspective and deliver millions of possible, tens of millions of API calls a second. And we can scale that very effectively and very efficiently.
So as long as the internet stays mostly IPv4, even the Internet of Things won't change your metrics, because there's still only 4 billion addresses to check.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're IPv4 and IPv6, and while there is some media talk about the uptick, we're still not seeing it to where it's a big concern for us, but it is something that we cover, a category of IPv6. And Internet of Things for us is something we started seeing 18 months ago with the expanded attack surface. We first noticed printers and devices, surveillance cameras, nanny cams starting to run across our agents. And they were, in a lot of cases, in some of our relationships to help prevent payment fraud, we saw those same IPs attempting to use stolen credentials to conduct credit card fraud through stolen means. So one of the more interesting ones was we actually witnessed a dialysis machine conducting rapid fire credit card transactions in an e-commerce environment. And this was something that we saw 6 months ago and actually triggered us to develop our healthcare report that we just released last week.
Yeah, so I saw that healthcare report. So how did you identify which IP addresses were associated with healthcare in the first place?
So a lot of research, a lot of analyst time to take a look at the attack vectors and the originating IPs and start to map those back to the healthcare industry. So a lot of hard work went into that, and it was a simple mapping of IPs to ownership records, and then back to those entities that were compromised. And it's no surprise to anyone that a large number of healthcare organizations, especially the mid-market and somewhat up on the provider side, were woefully compromised.
And is it a motivation from the attacker standpoint of getting medical records, or is it they just want those resources?
So good question. It's in a lot of cases the attacker probably doesn't even know that it's healthcare related. It's just attack surface. It's an IP space that can be used for malware delivery or part of a botnet, right? But what was surprising was the number of providers that had really poor security controls in place that would just leave the door wide open. So we're talking public-facing firewalls or passwords set to admin or default passwords not changed, which is endemic of the fact that the requirements of the healthcare industry have moved so fast towards data protection, but the technology and the skill sets in the security organizations have not caught up. Financial services has had time to harden their defenses. Healthcare has not, and it's problematic and something that's only going to increase as we see more data move online in the healthcare space.
In a highly secure organization, wouldn't they recognize that all your sensors are pinging all their IP addresses and they'd start to block you?
So no. So the way it works, they ping us. So what happens in highly secure organizations, we had many Fortune 100s that were in our report, though not named, of course, there's a misconfigured server that the organization is unaware of that is attacking our infrastructure. And so they're unaware until we present the data that this server is attacking us through an aggressive SSH port scan. And that's one of the services we deliver through popular at SIM solutions like Splunk and others, is the ability for an organization to have purview over their servers that are, unbeknownst to them, attacking our infrastructure. And that's, when we talk about what you don't know, or the unknown unknowns, those are things that we bring to the table. Because of our incredible purview of what we see on the dark side, we connect the dots. We connect the dot from what our agents are seeing on the dark side of the internet to what should be a safe and secure server in a corporate environment, but is talking to bad actors and agents that are looked to be or emulating what an attacker would be after. So it's under the control of a third party.
So let's talk about your customers. How do you, what do you deliver to them? How do they consume what you have to offer?
So the way the customers consume our data, the answer is it depends. In a transactional e-commerce fraud prevention environment, it's simply by firing us IP addresses and other related information at scale, and we respond back with a full return on the API pre-auth so that they can make a decision. With respect to enterprise security, we provide a solution, dark list, which is the most malicious and high-risk IP addresses between 2 and 4 million at any given time. That's delivered as, again, an API that can be called down and is integrated most commonly into, or consumed most commonly by customers through SIM solutions. And it allows for, as I was mentioning earlier, the ability to gain insight into what aspects of my infrastructure are compromised and communicating with the dark side. So those are the two most common ways that companies interact with our data and consume it.
Seems like it would be great if a gateway vendor would have a rule in there, just block everything that Norse says to block, or various rankings in there.
Yeah, so that's really how it works. There's a 95% correlation between IP addresses that come flying out of unpublished Tor exit nodes and fraud. So it's important when I say unpublished Tor exit nodes, because there's published Tor and unpublished Tor, and those are popped up and down by adversaries at their leisure. And so when you have those kinds of data and statistics to support decisioning, there's no reason as to why you would not want to employ a policy or rule that would do that. And that's what we have a lot of our payment gateway customers and merchants do, is it's just default set to if Tor, deny.
Cool.
So there's multiple other examples where the behavior of the source is highly predictive of the end result. And so that translates into reduction of fraud, period.
Is there anything that's going to force you to keep scaling at a big rate, or do you already cover the internet so you're good?
So that's a good question. We continue to widen and deploy additional agents. We're nearing saturation in some points of some parts of the world. As we see development in Africa and other parts, we are following the bandwidth, if you will, right? So that's sort of what drives our deployment of sensors and agents. So we'll continually keep up with that, but in the parts of the world where we need to have purview, we have very good intelligence.
Then just what about somebody behind a gateway? So one device inside a large enterprise is malicious and spewing stuff, but to your sensors, it looks like it's the gateway device. So all of a sudden you black hole the entire corporation. How do you differentiate?
So when we see traffic coming from an enterprise that is, because it's a NATed firewall or NATed IP address, that is something that we take into account with respect to our risk profiling. And so when you're looking at doing automated security and automated blocking, there are those that are clear and decisions can be made without human intervention, and others that would require one to make a better decision around, look, this is an entire organization. Now, depending on the use case, or depending on the nature of the attack, if there's a compromised server, and I'm talking about a non-fraud scenario here, that is part of an enterprise, you can't shut off the communications with the customer, but you do now have data and intelligence that, whether that partner is part of your supply chain or otherwise, must be used and tracked and determined as to how I want to interact with this partner in the future, if it's a trusted business partner. If it's a customer, again, in order to move the needle back to a draw with respect to the adversaries and the enterprises, we can't simply ignore those instances. They need to be evaluated and appropriate action taken in terms of how we interact. So my statement is that any kind of risk, whether it's looks like it's coming from a enterprise or something beneath, must be chased down by the security team.
So after several years in the anti-fraud space especially, you must have come in the sights of the cyber criminal underworld. Have you seen any attempts to evade or disable you?
So what we see very targeted spear phishing against our executives. That's very good. Not uncommon for security companies. At times we will see, and we have a mass number of sensors, but if we see a sensor starting to exhibit less activity, then it simply means we need to do some maneuvering of that sensor. And that's part of what our engineering and analyst team engages in, is actively monitoring our sensors and agents to ensure the highest possible fidelity. And so we look at activity against our sensors as a true indicator of the stealthiness measurement, if you will.
Cool. So is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that what Norse is what's unique about Norse between us and any other company in our space and security space is that we're focused on delivering dark intelligence, the unknown unknowns, a vector that's not covered today, in a way that allows us to take off another bite of where bad actors are able to move freely. And so as we deploy this, and there will be other ways that this gets deployed this year that we'll talk about and communicate, there will be opportunities for customers to take advantage of all of our data in a live environment and realize some incredible benefits as a result of having access to our full data set. So that's exciting.
It is, very much so. Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you, Richard.